If you want a scandal that feels like a trapdoor opening under a celebrity's feet, Li Yifeng is the perfect case study, because it wasn't built on vague gossip or a slow-burning rumor. It hit like an official stamp. Before September 2022, Li Yifeng, also known in international media as Evan Li, was a premium product in China's entertainment economy. Dramas, films, fashion, endorsements, and an audience big enough to move entire marketing campaigns. He had the kind of career that looks protected, until the day the protection stops working. Then came the headline that changed everything. Reuters reported that China's state broadcaster CCTV said Li Yifeng had been detained by Beijing police on suspicion of soliciting prostitutes. That's the moment a scandal becomes a collapse, because in China's entertainment system, moral violations don't just damage reputation, they can erase a public identity overnight. And what made this story feel even colder was the language used in coverage about the police statement. The South China Morning Post reported that the police statement said the person confessed to visiting prostitutes multiple times and had been placed under administrative detention. The details matter, because in these scandals, the difference between accused, detained, and confirmed by authorities is the difference between a rumor and a professional death sentence. Now, here's the retention hook. The real story isn't only what happened. It's what happens after the confirmation, when the modern celebrity economy turns into a demolition machine. Within hours, brand partnerships began breaking like glass. Bloomberg reported that Prada cut ties with Li Yifeng after he was held in a prostitution scandal, citing police and the broader crackdown on entertainment and fan culture. Other outlets similarly reported brands ending partnerships, treating it as immediate risk control, not a moral debate. Because endorsements don't wait for your side of the story, they wait for certainty. And in a scandal tied to a police statement, uncertainty becomes poisonous. From a storytelling perspective, this is your opening scene. A star wakes up as a national icon and ends the day as a name brands don't want to touch. You can feel the silence that follows, not the dramatic kind. The corporate kind. The kind that drains a person out of a marketing plan, out of a search result, out of future schedules, as if they never existed. And then comes the darker question, the one that keeps viewers locked in. Why is the fall so complete? Why does China treat certain celebrity offenses not as a bad week, but as a total cancellation? That's where this scandal becomes bigger than Li Yifeng. Because in the same news cycle, reporters linked his case to a wider tightening of control over entertainment, fan culture, and celebrity morality. So your audience isn't only watching a scandal. They're watching an example of how the system works. How quickly a career can be shut off, especially when the state has already been warning the industry that it wants cleaner celebrities. Part 1 ends here, with the cliffhanger that naturally pulls into Part 2. If the scandal hit in one day, then what kind of empire did Li Yifeng build before it collapsed? And why did brands and platforms treat him like a liability the moment the story broke? To understand why this scandal hit like a meteor, you need to understand what Li Yifeng represented inside the machine. In the Chinese celebrity economy, there are stars, and then there are assets, people whose public image is so controlled, so marketable, so stable, that brands treat them like a safe investment. Li Yifeng was positioned as that kind of asset. Clean-cut, photogenic, emotionally accessible in dramas, fashionable enough for luxury partnerships, and popular enough to justify high endorsement fees. That's the key. Popularity isn't the only currency. Reliability is. Brands don't just buy a face. They buy a promise. Your image won't explode. Your private life won't become their headline. Your name won't force them to issue a public apology. And in China, especially after the government signaled a crackdown on certain entertainment behaviors, brand risk became even more sensitive. Bloomberg framed Li's fall within a wider crackdown on the entertainment industry and fan culture. That context matters because it tells you why the reaction was instant. The moment Reuters reported CCTV saying he was detained, the market didn't ask, "Is he talented?" It asked, "Is he safe?" And the answer became, "Not anymore." What makes this scandal so good for a documentary-style channel is that it's not only about one celebrity's mistake, it's about how modern stardom works when the public is part of the discipline system. Fans build you up, but the same attention can destroy you when the story flips. Then add one more layer, China's moral governance of celebrity culture. When a scandal involves a police statement and a behavior treated as illegal, it's not just a personal scandal, it becomes a social warning. In those moments, the industry often reacts with a kind of synchronized distancing. Brands cut ties, platforms remove exposure, and partners go silent. China Daily reported that multiple brands canceled partnerships after Li was detained on solicitation charges. This is where your voiceover should become visual even without video. Imagine a billboard being replaced, a commercial being re-edited, a campaign page being deleted. Not because of a rumor, because of a risk calculation. And that explains why the fallout is so extreme. The entertainment industry fears not only public backlash, but regulatory consequences and reputational contagion. Even a brand that doesn't care about morality cares about being dragged into controversy. So Part 2 establishes the real theme of the series. Li Yifeng wasn't just a star. He was a symbol of safe celebrity, and that's why his scandal felt like a betrayal, not only to fans, but to the corporate logic that paid him. Part 2 ends with the question that viewers can't resist. If a system can erase someone this quickly, what exactly did the police statement say? And why did it become the final trigger? That takes us to Part 3, the official framing and what administrative detention means and how the story was reported. Here is where the story stops being an internet drama and becomes a public record, at least in how it was widely reported. Reuters reported that CCTV said Li Yifeng had been detained by Beijing police on suspicion of soliciting prostitutes. The wording was blunt. It didn't leave room for maybe. It was reported as an official broadcast based on police action. Then the reporting around the police statement pushed the scandal into a deeper, uglier territory. SCMP reported that the police statement said the person confessed to visiting prostitutes multiple times and had been placed under administrative detention. Those two phrases, multiple times and administrative detention, did something lethal to his career. Because multiple times frames it as repeated behavior, not a single lapse. And administrative detention signals that the state treated it as a punishable offense under public security rules. Now let's talk about the scandal mechanics. This is a retention goldmine. In celebrity scandals, audiences often debate what's true. In this case, the major reporting did not frame it as an open-ended rumor. It framed it as a detention linked to state media and police reporting. That changes how the public reacts, and it changes how corporate partners respond. This is where your narration should become tight and cinematic. In one day, Li Yifeng went from endorsement face to risk hazard. And brands don't negotiate with risk hazards. Bloomberg reported Prada ended its partnership with him in the immediate fallout, and other outlets reported similar brand exits. In China's celebrity ecosystem, there's another brutal reality. Some scandals can be managed. This kind usually can't, because it collides with legality, morality, and national image all at once. Then there's the psychological side. Fans. When an idol-like figure collapses, the fandom splits. Some defend, some deny, some feel betrayed, some go silent. And in that chaos, the system behaves like a firewall. Brands cut ties not only to avoid scandal, but to avoid fan wars that create negative marketing by association. And that leads to another why that holds viewers. Why was this scandal treated as a cancellation-level event instead of a temporary controversy? Because it wasn't only about sex, it was about control and about the state setting a standard for celebrity behavior in an era of tightening entertainment governance. Bloomberg's framing of a crackdown context supports that broader interpretation. So Part 3 ends with the moment of irreversible damage. After the police-related reporting, it didn't matter what Li Yifeng's next statement would be. The system had already moved. Brands had moved. Media had moved. His public image had been reclassified. Next comes Part 4, the domino effect, brand terminations, disappearing from public life, and what it means to be canceled in China. Part 4 is where the scandal becomes a demolition montage. China Daily reported that multiple brands canceled their partnership agreements with Li Yifeng after the detention reports. Bloomberg reported Prada cut ties, and other outlets highlighted luxury brands dropping him as well. This is what viewers love in scandal storytelling, the domino sequence, because it's tangible, it's measurable. You can show it with headlines and logos instead of speculation. But you should also explain the strategy behind the speed. Brands don't want to be seen waiting while a scandal grows. Waiting looks like approval, so they act quickly, and the speed itself becomes another headline, feeding the perception that the scandal is bigger than it already is. Then comes the second layer, platform visibility. In China, scandals tied to official allegations can lead to rapid disappearance from public-facing spaces, less promotion, fewer appearances, fewer algorithmic pushes. Even when not officially announced as a ban, a celebrity can effectively become invisible. This is the soft erasure that makes China celebrity scandals so different from Western celebrity scandals. In some markets, a scandal can become a rebrand. In this market, the punishment can look like silence. Now, your voiceover should add one more angle that deepens the episode. Li Yifeng's scandal didn't happen in a vacuum. It landed in a period where China's entertainment sector was facing intense scrutiny, fan culture, bad influence, and moral messaging. Bloomberg explicitly framed the brand reaction within that crackdown environment. So the fallout isn't only about what he did, it's about what the system needs to signal: compliance, discipline, and control. This is where you can keep the audience hooked with a hard truth. In a crackdown era, some celebrities don't just fall, they become examples. And examples aren't allowed to return easily. So Part 4 ends with the natural cliffhanger. If Li Yifeng vanished from the spotlight in 2022, what happened afterward? Did the punishment end at public cancellation? Or did the consequences keep growing? That brings us to Part 5. Longer-term financial and legal repercussions reported later, including asset freezes reported in 2025, which should be treated carefully as reported, not definitive without official confirmation. Here's the final twist that makes this story feel like a full documentary rather than a headline recap. For celebrities, the scandal moment is loud. But the punishment after the moment can be quiet, and it can last longer than anyone expects. In 2022, the key facts reported by major outlets were clear. Detention reported by state media, plus brand severing. But the longer tail of this scandal, what happens to money, contracts, and corporate obligations, often surfaces later. In 2025, Hong Kong outlet The Standard reported that Li Yifeng was hit with an asset freeze, reported around $54.3 million, $49.9 million, believed linked to compensation for advertising contract breaches and disrupted projects following the scandal. A legal industry bulletin on Lexology also summarized an asset freeze and described it as linked to contract breaches and undelivered projects after his downfall. Important note for your channel. Treat these as reported developments unless you can confirm via official court documents. But from a storytelling standpoint, they're powerful because they show that canceled isn't only reputation, it's litigation, enforcement, and financial aftershocks. Now you can deliver your final retention line. The headline ends in 2022. The consequences keep billing him in 2025. This is how you close a scandal story with depth. Because it reframes celebrity collapse as an ecosystem event. Brands lose campaign value, agencies lose negotiating power, platforms lose content revenue, and the celebrity can become liable for breach damages and advertising losses, depending on contracts and local enforcement. Then you widen the lens. Li Yifeng's scandal fits a broader pattern of China's entertainment discipline era, where certain violations trigger rapid industry purge. The speed of brand exits and the emphasis on crackdown context in reporting make that interpretation plausible. Now you end Part 5 with a documentary-style closing that keeps you safe and credible. According to Reuters, CCTV reported Li Yifeng was detained by Beijing police on suspicion of soliciting prostitutes. Reporting elsewhere described a police statement indicating multiple occasions and administrative detention. Brands rapidly cut ties, as documented by outlets like Bloomberg and China Daily. And later reports suggested financial aftershocks continued years later. Then end with the big question your viewers will carry into the comments. If fame in China can be built like an empire, how fragile is it really when the system decides it's time to erase you?